Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content I'm putting up, be sure to give the video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe so you always know when the next video pops up. Now that we got that part out of the way, let's get into the video. Final Fantasy XIV is a massive game with thousands of hours of content. What I'm going to do here is break down some of the major plot points for those of you who want to know more about Eorzea, but may not have time to experience it all firsthand. This time we're picking up with the third part of the Gunbreaker storyline. The story begins with the Warrior of Light being recruited by God's Quiverbow to help hunt down a group of highwaymen who've been attacking people on the outskirts of Gridania. You head out of the city and see a Hrothgar and a Viera getting attacked. The Hrothgar is holding his own, but he suddenly drops down in pain when one of the bandits attacks the Viera. Fortunately for her, you're there to help out. The pair thanks you for your aid, and the God's Quiver shows up too late to do anything other than identify the fallen bandits as members of the group that they've been hunting. They find it strange that they decided to attack the strangers. They never targeted people who looked like they could fight back, but they probably will think twice before they do it again. The Quivers vow to continue looking for the remaining bandits before leaving the three of you alone. The Hrothgar is a bit more bothered by the attack than the guards. The bandits hadn't tried to rob them at all, going straight for the kill as if that's what their goal was all along, and they would have succeeded if it wasn't for you. He introduces himself as Radovan, and his friend is Sophie. The two of them came from Ilzabard, where he had once been a soldier for Garlemald. It wasn't by choice. His family had been taken hostage and he'd been forced to serve to keep them alive. Since then, he's managed to escape from that life. Sophie was a member of a resistance movement fighting against Garlemald until they were all rounded up or killed. Her and Radovan had decided that they'd have a better chance of surviving if they stuck together, so they began traveling together. Radovan had once been the personal guard to his queen, but he'd failed to protect her. He even lost his wife and son, yet he has honed his skills over the years, and he feels that he could use them to help people, which is why Sophie suggested he look for work as a bodyguard in Eorzea, starting in Gridania. Radovan asks you to work with them since you know your way around Eorzea, and in exchange, he'll teach you the art of being a gunbreaker. A true wielder of a gunblade, not like the Garleans that you fought who've been wielding lesser versions of the weapons. The Empire uses edged weapons with firearms bolted to them, but the weapons made by Radovan's clan use etherically imbued cartridges that ignite and release ether when you pull the trigger. This sends shockwaves through the blade, making it more destructive, and the cartridges can even be fired in the air to produce barriers. More explanations will come later if you decide to join them. You agree to take the training as payment, and the three of you become a team, because who wouldn't want to learn how to use a gunblade? Cloud Strife may be one of the most popular characters from Final Fantasy, but the gunblades from Final Fantasy VIII are by far the coolest weapons. Radovan thinks it's a good idea to find a job first, then train you in between assignments since food isn't free, but he has no idea where to start. You suggest the Adventurers Guild, since that's how you got started, so you take them to Gridania. Once Mother Mayone makes them formal members of the guild, the time has come for them to be able to accept assignments, and they've already been given their first potential client. A man named Lassenschau is waiting at the Wailing Barracks, and Sophie and Radovan decide to head there without your help so they can learn the city. When you all arrive, you're given a briefing about your assignment. Your task is to guard Aditha, a gifted musician who was assaulted during a recital. Her manager canceled all of her public appearances until the assailant can be brought to justice, but she's gone a bit stir-crazy and wants to walk around the city. Your job is to guard her during her little stroll, a job that Radovan and Sophie eagerly accept. It's public knowledge that her manager hired the Adventurers Guild, so it won't be hard for the people who attacked Aditha to know that she's out. So Radovan wants you to be on guard. While you wait for Aditha to get ready, he suggests that you check around to see if anyone has a grudge against the girl. A few people think that it could be one of her fans, but Radovan's not convinced. The girl is a bit loud and has a strange fetish for Viera ears, and definitely won't be hard to miss. Radovan decides that you and he will escort the girl on her walk while Sophie stays behind as backup if you get pinned down. The two of you head off with Aditha, who immediately gets swarmed by fans. Radovan decides to see if he can find out why the bandits are attacking her from these newcomers. From what they say, Aditha has only just begun performing, and some of the other musicians are jealous of her success. As you and Radovan come to the conclusion that another musician is responsible for the attacks, bandits appear. They recognize their target by her rabbit ears, something that's a bit stupid since the girl isn't a Viera and could have easily just taken the things off. Radovan uses the fight as a time to teach you a bit about being a gunbreaker. You deal with the bandits, but as the walk takes you to the amphitheater, a masked woman with a really big monster sicks it after Aditha. I don't know where she got the thing, but fighting it, the bandits, and keeping Aditha alive will definitely give you a crash course in wielding your new skills. After you win, the masked woman is revealed to be Undine, one of the other performers who you interviewed earlier. She was angry that Aditha stole her fan, so she decided to have the girl murdered. Even the Gridanian police are shocked that she would try to kill the girl over something like that. She even went as far as to pay the bandits in the woods, and because of her description of Aditha's bunny ear headdress, they mistook Sophie for her. In a world with a whole race of women walking around with rabbit ears, that's the only descriptive feature the bandits asked for so they could track their target. In any case, everything worked out fine in the end. Before you go, Aditha requests a word in private where she reveals herself to be a sylph in disguise. All she really wants to do is play music, but if people find out what she is, then they'll run her out of town. Still, since you risked your life to keep her safe, she thought it was only fair that she told you the truth about who she was. Of course, the three of you agree to keep the secret, and you go your separate ways. Radovan is impressed by how quickly you grasp the differences between using a gunblade and a regular sword. He goes into a long story about how the Queen Gunhilda was guarded by a group of unique warriors called Gunhilda's Blades. Gunhilda's Blades eventually became known as the Gunblades. While he's talking, Sophie is so bored that she starts to fall asleep on her feet. When she can't take Radovan's monologue anymore, which was an interesting, if a bit long-winded way of saying that it was his duty to pass on the history and skills of the Gunbreakers, she interrupts, causing him to decide to pick up the lesson later. Now that he's seen Gridania, he wants to see more of Eorzea. Sophie suggests Ul'dah because of its markets that have goods from around the world. Well, we know where her money's going, so it's off to Ul'dah you go. When you arrive, not only has Sophie changed clothes, she's going to do that in every city to, quote, blend in, although I think she's just a glamour addict, but they found a new client. A woman named Auriel is seeking to hire some bodyguards to keep her husband away from her and her son. Every time she's alone, Gerard harasses her, and if she leaves the city, she's afraid he'll follow her, so she wants you all to scare him off if he shows up. Radovan doubts he'll show up if he sees armed guards, so you all hide to catch him when he appears. Sure enough, he shows up as expected, but it doesn't seem to be all that threatening. He claims to only want what's best for his son. Despite his words, when Radovan threatens to kill him, he runs off. Auriel is pleased with your performance and leaves with her son. Easy enough job, right? You know that's not the case. Nothing about your work has ever been easy. Sophie feels the same way, and she wants you to follow them. Her hunch is right. You catch up to Auriel in time to see her trying to sell her son to some rather unsavory fellows. Before you can step in, the boy's father confronts the slavers and is thoroughly beaten. Radovan goes to help, but he's racked with sudden pain, so you have to do it. Gerard thanks you, and Sophie explains that the reason she knew something was wrong was because Auriel showed signs of being a somnus addict. A lot of people wouldn't have noticed the signs, but Sophie had seen them before. Gerard admits that he knew about it as well, and he blames himself. He had a gambling problem, and Auriel had taken their son and left him. That act had caused him to turn his life around, but once he had paid off his debts and tracked down his wife, it was too late. She had fallen in with the bad crowd and had used somnus to escape. It made her not care about anything, even her own child. But Gerard knows of a place that can treat people like his wife, and he has enough gills saved to get her started on the treatments. While she's getting better, their son will stay with him. Radovan chastises him for jumping in a fight like that. If he dies, there'll be no one left to look after his kids, so he needs to be more careful. He promises that he will before heading off with his family in tow. Radovan apologizes to you for collapsing, and since you'll be fighting together, he thinks it's only fair that he explains why it keeps happening. When he was a part of the Imperial Army, he disobeyed a direct order and was sentenced to solitary confinement for over a decade. During that time, he was forced to wear a Magitech collar that they used to electrocute him whenever they wanted, and they wanted to, a lot. Even after years of being free, his body still suffers from the effects at random. He's gotten better, yet he still has a while before he's back to 100%. That's part of the reason why Sophie sticks with him, so she can treat him. They met in the same Garlean prison where she was waiting to be executed along with a few members of the Resistance and some other undesirables. Some of them were somnus addicts, which is why she recognized the signs. Radovan had been tunneling out of his cell a bit each night for 10 years. The problem was, he had dug in the wrong direction. Instead of tunneling out of the prison, he tunneled into Sophie's cell. Fortunately, his mishap caused a ruckus that let him and Sophie escape. He went home, only to find his family dead. Shaking off the depressing memories, Radovan decides it's time to plan your next outing, so the three of you head to Limsa, the city of pirates, to begin your next adventure. When we last left off, you, Radovan, and Sophie were heading to Limsa, the city that was formed by pirates, a fact that Radovan is not too happy with. Sophie, on the other hand, loves the view of the sea and the outfits. Yes, she changed her clothes again. But she needs money to enjoy the city. Fortunately, the Yellow Jackets have already offered them an assignment. A soldier named Futag wants you to guard the former leader of the Flaming Mongrels. They were a group of raiders that gained considerable power in the criminal underworld, but it ended when Goldwaits turned himself in out of the blue. He plans on testifying about his crimes as well as the crimes of every organization he's dealt with. Naturally, they all want to kill him, so it's your job to escort him from Moabi docks to Limsa and to keep him alive. The reason the Yellow Jackets are hiring outsiders is to avoid as much attention as possible. Too many soldiers would be like a beacon to all of the people who want Goldwaits dead. So Futag leaves to secure the route and tells you to meet him at the dry docks when you're ready. Sophie's not really a fan of the job. Defending a criminal is not something that she wants to do, but Radovan says if the information in his head is valuable, it can be used to save lives, so you head off to the docks. When you arrive, Futag has already scouted ahead and found people waiting to ambush you. Your job is to deal with them without anyone noticing. Sounds like a job for a ninja instead of somebody who literally makes things explode with his sword, but we're gonna just go with it. Radovan thinks you should take the lead to cut through the ambush to show how far you've come in your training, while everyone else will stick close to Goldwaits just in case you're ambushed. You take out the assassins pretty easily, and you all regroup only to be warned by another guard that the men you took out were just scouts for a much larger force that's waiting for you. The guard and her men will take Goldwaits to a safe hiding place while the attackers are dealt with. Futag is confused since he hadn't heard this information, and he's even more confused when the newcomer relays orders that he's to return to his post, and you're no longer needed for guard duty. The orders come from a higher up, so he has no choice but to obey, but he guarantees that you'll still get your full payment regardless. The entire thing seems strange to Radovan, and since he doesn't answer to the Yellow Jacket commander, he intends to complete his job. So you all follow Goldwaits only to arrive in time to see the guard trying to kill him herself. One of her friends died because of him, and she wants revenge. Fortunately for her, Radovan talks her down moments before Futag arrives, having learned that the orders were fake. The rogue guard is taken away, and Goldwaits admits that he's dying anyway, and he only wants to help fix the city that he destroyed before he dies. Limsa's full of criminals, and if he can clear some out before he dies, then at least he's done one good thing. The rest of the trip is uneventful, and once you're done, your crew decides it's time to head to Ishgard. Even with her new overcoat, Sophie is not a fan of the cold. Unlike other cities, Ishgard doesn't have an adventurers guild. Instead, the Temple Knights issue contracts for random jobs. The Knights have an assignment involving a man named Reese of Garland Ironworks. Radovan hopes he gets to meet Sid, the leader of the Ironworks, since he's one of the few Garleans who turned their back on the Empire. But first, you head to the Skysteel Manufactory to meet Reese. Your job is to protect a Garlean engineer who recently defected from the Empire. His job is to oversee the installation of a new heating system in the city to help the poor survive the severe weather of the city. Having seen a kid freeze to death shortly after they arrived, both Sophie and Radovan can understand the need for the project. A group known as the Alliday have been dispatched from the Empire to kill the defector. Both Sophie and Radovan know the name well. It is made up of prisoners who the Empire allowed to fight for them to reduce their prison sentences. They are incredibly dangerous, led by a man named Vitus Quo Masala, who is so brutal that he made other Garleans uncomfortable. He was also the man who had tortured Radovan. Had Reese known how dangerous it would be, he would have canceled the mission, but it's too late now. The airship will be arriving at the observatorium a bit away from the city in a few hours since Ishgard wouldn't let an Imperial ship dock in their capital. You'll have to lead the engineer to the city on foot. Before you head out, Radovan decides that it's best for Sophie to stay behind. He doesn't want her to cross paths with the Alliday because it'll be hard to protect her and the engineer. She gets mad at him for treating her like a burden when she thought the two of them were a team, and she storms off. With her gone, Radovan tells you the truth. He doesn't think she's a burden, he just doesn't want her to face Vitus. With his family gone, she's all he has left, and he doesn't want anything to happen to her. He promises to apologize when you get back. The engineer is a man named Cato non Mamula, and while he doesn't say anything, the shock on his face is proof that Radovan recognizes the man. You spot members of the Alliday immediately, and Radovan sends you to draw them out and deal with them while he takes Cato north. When you meet up again, Reese has been injured by some of the attackers. The trek is getting dangerous, and there's no telling what Vitus has planned. Radovan decides that you should look after Reese while he and Cato head on, since a group of two is less obvious than four. Apparently Sophie followed you, and she shows up while you're waiting, letting you know that she dealt with a few of the Alliday on her own. When you tell her that Radovan went ahead with Cato, she freaks out. Radovan is from Bozja Citadel, which was destroyed by an Imperial experiment gone wrong. Cato was the right-hand man of Medus Garland, who led the project. Radovan protesting the experiments was the reason he'd been locked up in the first place, and the city being wiped out was the result. Radovan may have wanted to go off alone with Cato to exact revenge for the loss of his family. The two of you follow the tracks, and you arrive in time to see Radovan about to murder Cato. Between him admitting that he's done everything that he could to make up for that day, and you reminding Radovan of his oaths, he doesn't kill the engineer. Ashamed of himself, Radovan names you the last of the Gunbreakers and leaves. Unbeknownst to you all, the Alliday are watching you from above. Sophie's a bit slower than you are, and she arrives after Radovan has left. She's not too happy about him wandering off in the middle of a job, but the two of you finish it just fine without any more attacks. Reese assures you that Ishgard will be on guard just in case Vetus tries for Cato again, and you and Sophie celebrate another job well done. A little while later, Sophie informs you that there still hasn't been any Alliday activity or any sign of Radovan. She's more irritated with him than worried. At least that's what she pretends to be. So the two of you head to the Temple Knights to look for something to do until Radovan decides to come back. Someone is looking for bodyguards, but they want to remain hidden for their safety. They want you to meet them in Coertus to find out more about the job. With nothing else to do, the two of you head off. The client turns out to be Vetus himself, and the two of you are caught in a binding trap. Vetus had come for Cato, but after seeing that he was hanging around with the Warrior of Light, he couldn't pass up the chance to kill you. Garlemald wants you dead so badly that he could undoubtedly get a promotion for doing the job. Lucky for you, Radovan shows up and breaks you free. He had been tracking the Alliday and knew that they were going to come after you. It gave him time to get Cato to craft a device that let him use the collars that Vetus used to control his soldiers against them. No longer of any use to him, Vetus kills his own men and attacks you himself. He's incredibly strong, holding his own against all three of you, but with your combined powers, you finally manage to bring him down. After the fighting, Radovan apologizes for his actions. Come to find out, when you had seen him and Cato, Radovan had seen the Alliday watching you. He hadn't understood why they weren't attacking, so he split off to see whether they were after you or Cato. When he realized that the target was you, he came up with a plan to take down Vetus' army, since fighting him and all of his troops would have been impossible. Radovan had never planned on killing Cato. He just wanted to see if he was truly sorry for his part in what happened to Bozja. With Vetus a threat no longer, Cato shouldn't have to hide anymore, so you all return to Ishgard to deliver the good news. Cato is extremely grateful that he can work on the heating system for Ishgard in peace, so he bids you farewell and heads off to get started. Having seen how far you've come, Radovan believes that there's no more that he can teach you, and it's time for you to advance on your own. But before you go, he'd like you to take them to Revenant's Toll, a place that is supposedly booming with adventurers. He hopes to find more students there, and if people see the Warrior of Light wielding a gunblade, they'll undoubtedly want to learn. Always willing to help friends, you lead the way. With the danger behind you, you leave Radovan and Sophie to their adventures until the day comes when you all meet again. It's been quite some time since you last saw your friends Radovan and Sophie, so you swing by Revenant's Toll just to see how they're doing. Radovan's been bombarded with quite a few adventurers who want to learn how to wield the coolest weapon ever, the gunblade, if you didn't know what I was talking about. However, the way you caught on to using the weapon has him with pretty high expectations. He's been so busy with them that he hasn't done any of the other jobs. Sophie, on the other hand, has gotten sucked into the daily grind for tomestones that you probably know so well. Your friends are curious to hear about what you've been up to, and you have a bit of interesting information for them, something Radovan will find quite interesting. Thancred, a fellow member of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn who you are undoubtedly familiar with, had been trained as a gunbreaker. As you know, Thancred gets around, and during his time spying in Garlean territory he had been trained as a gunbreaker. However, the skill wasn't all that useful when it came to stealth, so he had stuck to what he knew. However, on the first, the skills more than came in handy. Radovan doesn't think that's possible. He was the only gunbreaker to escape from Bozja's Citadel, and if he didn't train Thancred, then who did? Sophie did hear from someone traveling through Revenant's Toll that a Hrothgar with a gunblade was in Gridania. At first she thought they meant Radovan, but he hasn't been back there since you all went together. That means there must be another survivor. Radovan's so excited that he runs off, not even thinking about the fact that another gunbreaker may not even want to see him. You and Sophie follow him to Gridania to check with Mother Mione to see if she's seen this mysterious Bozjan. Mione has indeed seen the man, but that's not the most important part. The man was looking for Radovan. She told him about Radovan's bodyguard assignments, and he went to find your old client in Gridania. Aditha, the sylph in disguise who loved performing and wearing bunny ears, who you had protected from assassins when you first came to Gridania, actually shows up at the inn, much to Sophie's displeasure. Her and her manager had come to have a drink to celebrate her most recent performance, which saves you the trouble of hunting her down. The other Gunbreaker did seek them out, and they had heard that, after guarding them, you and Radovan had headed to Ul'dah. He heads to Ul'dah in search of your second client, and, still wanting to catch him, you all head to meet Gerard, since his wife, Auriel, is probably still undergoing treatment for her drug addiction. Since you last saw Gerard, he and his son have been living together, and he's kept his word, paying for his wife's rehab. She's gotten better, but she hasn't forgiven herself for what she did to her son. I mean, the woman was selling the kid to slavers for drug money, so she definitely should feel bad. While it's good that they're doing well, once again, you're a few steps behind the other Gunbreaker. He's already headed to the airship landing after Gerard told him that you left Ul'dah, meaning he's undoubtedly on his way to Limsa Lominsa. Futag Yafatag catches you up on what happened to Guildweeds after you left Limsa. The man testified just like he said he would, and his information led to a lot of high-profile criminals getting arrested. Not long after that, he died in his sleep. Again, you've missed the Hrothgar, which means he's headed off to Ishgard. You know, since you all knew that he was following your old trail, then you could have just headed to Ishgard in the first place and waited for him, which would have saved a ton of money on the airship tickets, but whatever. Rhys has indeed seen the other Gunbreaker, but you've missed him once again. Radovan decides to head back to Revenant's Toll until Rhys lets you know that when he mentioned Mamula, the Garlean engineer who you protected forever ago, he seemed shocked. When he asked where to find the man, Rhys told him. Now you remember how Radovan had reacted when he saw Mamula. He had been a hair's breadth away from killing the man. The only thing that had stopped him from taking revenge for everyone who died in Bozja was you. And you aren't there to stop this Gunbreaker. Mamula is in Providence Point inspecting the exterior wall, so you race off to save him. The three of you arrive to see Mamula talking to a Hrothgar named Rostic, who hadn't come to kill him at all. Instead, he wanted to ask the man for help with rebuilding Bozja Citadel. While that catches Radovan off guard, what Rostic says next is even more shocking. There were other survivors. People who were away on missions or visiting other settlements managed to make it out of the range of the explosion. Sadly, Radovan's family and the royal family all died, but Rostic is searching for all survivors, and together they will rebuild their homeland or find a new place to settle, and he wants Radovan to join him in the effort. It only takes him seeing the horror on Sophie's face for him to turn down the offer. He lost one family, but he gained a new one with Sophie, and there's no way he'd ever abandon her. Not to mention he's got a new Gunbreaker to nurture and train. With no hard feelings, Rostic heads off, but not before telling Radovan to send any Bozjans he comes across in his direction. Mamula thanks you for coming to his aid, and once he's done with his duties in Ishgard, he will do what he can to help restore Bozja for Rostic and his people. Now that this little adventure is done, you head back to Revenant's Toll. Since Radovan knows that there are other Gunbreakers out there, he doesn't have to rush his search for potential students. Instead, he's going to go back to being a bodyguard for a while to show more people what Bozjans can do. Sophie thinks that she can do the same for Dalmasca, since she had apparently forgotten to mention that she's from Rabanastre. Even though Garleans destroyed the city, her traditions live on, so while Radovan shows off his Gunbreaker skills, she can spread her traditions to the people. Of course, they will still use Revenant's Toll as their base, so your paths will certainly cross again, and next time, you may even be as strong of a Gunbreaker as Radovan. This concludes the story of the Gunbreaker, at least for now. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video.